Task Force will come to order. This is the final meeting, the final meeting of the EMS Task Force. We appreciate all of the committee members, the commission members, and the work that has been performed on this task force. We appreciate the involvement of all the stakeholders. At this time, I'm going to ask if you have a cell phone, please silence it. And we need to have the roll call, please.
Senator Douglas.
Present.
Senator Storm.
Here.
Senator Webb. Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Meredith.
Yes, sir.
Representative Wilner.
Yes.
Co-Chair Fleming.
Present.
Co-Chair Givens.
Present. First item of business is going to be approval of the minutes from the November 1 meeting. Chair will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. And a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Record will reflect that the minutes for the November 1, 2022 meeting have been approved. In everyone's packet, we have a copy of the work product that we will be putting forth. It's been my experience working on task forces that we will not have a formal roll call vote on the final work product. My experience has been those of us, especially that are legislators, in those circumstances where we're forced to take a vote on a commission or a task force, and then we have to turn around in the legislative session and take a vote. Sometimes there's a sense of that first vote being binding, and so it's not going to be a roll call vote. When we finish today, I will be asking for a voice vote to put this before the General Assembly as a whole as our final work product. With that, Co-Chair Fleming, do you have any comments as we open up?
The only thing I want to say, Senator Givens, is that I appreciate the process we've gone through. It's been very thorough, very upfront, hopefully transparent in terms of trying to resolve the issues that we have seen in terms of providing delivery of services to our citizens of the Commonwealth. I do want to appreciate all the task members who participate in this process, and your input and thoughts are very valued, and we appreciate that. And also appreciate the co-chair, Senator Givens, for all his involvement in 777 last year to get us to this point, and hopefully we'll have a good recommendation and go before the General Assembly, and then we'll take appropriate action from that point on. So thank you, Senator Givens.
Very well. Have the stakeholders been made, has this information been made available to the stakeholders? Great. We received limited feedback. I am going to not go through each bullet item unless there's a feeling of need for us to review each one, which I'm not sensing a groundswell of support to go through each one. I will highlight the three that have been brought to my attention. Recommendation number 4. Current reading of the recommendation says, permit city and county governments to contract with third-party vendors under their current CON. There's been some discussion about whether that should stay or not as a recommendation. There's also been some discussion about rewording that recommendation. Chair is open to someone wishing to offer an opinion. Co-Chair Fleming, I think you had some input on this.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the intent of this was to give some flexibility to the city and counties in order to contract or work with a third-party vendor in order to deliver services. I know a good friend, Representative Meredith, mentioned something about competition, and I think that we need to be mindful of that, of his words, in terms of that being in play. But the CON, regardless if you go through a formal review or a sub review, it's still the holding of the city and county to provide that service and so forth. But it'll be their discretion if they so choose to work with and contract with a third-party vendor. So I wanted to just try to make sure, and that's clarity, because I've got some conflicting information from both sides on how this really reads and so forth. So that's the intent of that, to provide a little more flexibility for the city counties to work with and contract with the third-party contractor. in order to deliver the services, because sometimes the city county assets may be tied up, and they have somebody that need to transfer to a particular facility or to respond. That gives them some flexibility in order to continue to provide that service, and not cause any type of unnecessary delay, or at least reduce the delay in delivering that services. So that's the initial intent, Mr. Chairman.
Staff has provided some recommended language that they feel would get us in the right direction, and I think they've done a nice job with that recommended language. I do have a caution on the language we have in front of us. Members should have a copy of the recommended language change. It was just passed out on a single sheet. That recommended change would read, permit all city and county governments to contract with third-party vendors regardless of CON status. Regardless of CON status, all of us that have been involved in this discussion understand that to mean that you still go through the CON process to get a CON, whether it's the substantive review or the non-substantive review. The wording regardless of CON status may mislead some to think that you don't have to go through the CON process. So I don't think our intent is to permit every city and county government to contract with any third-party vendors. I think our intent is for city and county governments with CON, regardless of their CON status, to contract with third-party vendors. Is that correct?
I guess my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that the CON, these entities have to have a CON.
That's correct.
So there's really no way around in doing that. I think it goes back to what Mr. Representative Meredith mentioned in terms of if you don't have a CON, then basically you're inviting competition into that process.
That's correct.
And so, but since we're under the umbrella of everybody has to go through a CON process, that will still have to be applied, from my understanding, and then they can go through and either provide that service or contract it out.
So then my recommendation would be to make sure all of us align, and I agree with what you're saying. I think a simple clause, permit all city and county governments with a CON to contract with third-party vendors regardless of CON status.
Well,
Please, Representative Meredith.
If I might, just to make it a little bit clearer on that, I think yours was a good clarifying, but to say regardless of whether the CON went through the substantive review or non-substantive review process, instead of using status there.
All right. So we're going to strike the with a CON. Representative Meredith, I think you're on the right path. State it one more time for our staff. Read the entirety of what it would say.
Permit all city and county governments with a CON.
We can even strike that part now, I think.
Okay. To contract with third-party vendors regardless of whether their CON was obtained through a substantive review or non-substantive review process.
Or CON process.
I think his wording is perfect.
Okay.
His wording is perfect.
I'm just trying to truncate it.
Now, and again, for us as we wordsmith this, these are recommendations that still have to go through the process of the General Assembly crucible, and so lots of miles to travel. But this certainly does carry some weight with it. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. The next one we received some interesting feedback on, and I'm going to. He will be embarrassed to turn on his microphone, but Eric, if you'll turn on your microphone and speak to recommendation number 16, directing K-Beams to promulgate administrative regs related to certification or licensure of 911 dispatch. And the reason I'm asking Eric to speak to this is because this may be a preview of what lies ahead.
Do I have to introduce myself for the record?
Please do.
Eric Clark, Senate President's Office. So we received a call today from a representative with the 911 Association. Didn't get the full name, but apparently there are two 911 associations or trade associations that work in the 911 space who is expressing some concern with Section 16. Basically, the concern expressed was this would create additional regulatory burdens for 911 call centers. And they talked about how they were already trained and certified and jumped through a lot of hoops to get in the 911 space as it is. And they were reading recommendation 16 as another layer of regulatory oversight by K-beams. So they were expressing some concerns with recommendation 16.
I think our conversation was quite clear, and statute already, Eric, correctly, statute already provides regulatory authority to K-beams for 911 dispatch.
Correct, and that's reflected in recommendation 16 at the end. KRS 311A.025, I believe it's subsection 1, paragraph L of that statute, already requires this training of emergency medical dispatchers, dispatch instructor trainers, and dispatch centers.
Staff has clarified that that statute permits K-beams to promulgate these regulations. It does not require, so that the permission to do that falls solely with K-beams. No one else can do it, correct? Solely K-beams? By statute, solely K-beams. So, Director, we've looked to you and had conversations about this. We feel like this is something that this task force feels is important. I would encourage that it be for the purposes of streamlining and efficient operations, not just for the sake of promulgating regulations, but I feel confident that you're aware of that. Any members see a need to have any discussion or change on number 16? Seeing none, we'll move to the last one that I have, and this was on 23. Staff has brought to our attention a conversation about striking the word ambulance and adding the word providers. So it would read, direct K-beams and the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to identify categories of service providers that could provide transportation. I think that broadens it, and I would feel like that is in the spirit of the work that this task force has done. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the spirit of the change, and I was also going to bring up getting rid of ambulance there. But I wonder, instead of categories of service providers that could provide transportation, if we could maybe strike that and just put means of transportation. That leaves it entirely flexible and open for both K-beams and the cabinet to explore how we get people to the facilities that they need to get to.
Does anyone on the task force need that statement made again, or thoughts or input on the statement? Representative Wellner, state it one more time the way you would like for it to like for us to consider wording that.
Sure. Direct KBEMS and the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to identify means of transportation for individuals who are experiencing a behavioral health crisis, etc.
Our cabinet folks that were here prior to today in those conversations, I don't see them in the room, but I feel confident this would still provide the latitude for them to do what they want and a directive as to what our intent is. Any other thoughts? Co-chair?
Thank you, Mr. Co-chair. I think the use of the word means probably gives a little more flexibility, but I think to me, I'm looking at mean the same thing, but I'll go along with the Representative Wellner's suggestion in terms of having the word means in there. Gives a little more flexibility, probably.
What you need. Mm-hmm. All right. Seeing no other input on that. Folks, I think we've achieved a good work product here. I appreciate the input of everyone. The chair will entertain a motion that the Emergency Management Services Task Force recommend to the LRC for submission to the General Assembly the work product that we have before us as a final work product. The chair will entertain a motion as such after amending.
So move.
Motion and second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. This has been our most efficient meeting of all. Truly, though, thanks to everyone for their involvement and engagement. And please, let's keep this network of connections warm. Let's continue to build on it, and let's move forward on this effort.